So 2 days ago, I was talking about this article that I read in the New York Times about entitled "In Life and Business, Learning to Be Ethical," and so talking about how you know people. This one professor did an experiment where if you flip a coin and it turned out one way, you got a job that was really long and laborious, and if it turned out the other way, you got a job that was short and fun, and how people were left to flip the coin in a room where they were alone, and only 10% of the people flipped it and reported what it turned out. Everybody else cheated in one way, either by not flipping the coin and just marking down the short, fun thing, or by flipping the coin until it came out to be what they wanted it to be, and then marking that down. So this whole talk about ethics, okay? And so also they were saying how ethics used to come from religion and philosophy, but now it's coming through psychology and what did they call it? Kind of, economical psychology or something like that. There was a term. What was it? Anyway, okay. So I wanted to continue on from that. Okay. So it was saying, how we can nudge people towards doing the right thing. So first we need to be aware of the ways we fool ourselves. We have to learn how to avoid subconsciously turning our backs when faced with a moral dilemma. And then we have to be taught how to challenge people appropriately in those situations. So monitor ourselves and to help other people who are going down a slippery slope. When people predict how they're going to act in a given situation, the should self dominates. We should be fair, we should be generous, we should assert our values. Okay, but when the time for action comes, the want self dominates. I don't want to look like a fool. I don't want to be punished. Okay, so the old self-centered mind coming up. Our survival instinct is to want to be liked and to be included. Okay, we don't willfully do bad things, but when we're under the threat, our initial instinct is to downplay or ignore problematic situations. So situations in which we may have a different viewpoint than the rest of the group, where we may disagree with somebody's ethical behavior or whatever, or even our own. We don't want to appear like we're the only person who doesn't fit in. So we downplay the differences and cover them up. And attachment to reputation arises very strongly, as does attachment to approval. And then we often wind up doing what we think other people think we should do. So most people know the feeling. Something happens that we know is wrong, and we mean to speak up or make it right, but we can't quite figure out how to do it, and the moment passes. And then we justify that it was okay that we acted the way we did. So how do we change this? Using social and cognitive behavioral psychology as well as neuroscience is the first step to become aware of our natural inclinations. Okay, so think back. When are you vulnerable to not speaking up and not saying what needs to be said? Yeah, so check in our own experiences. Is it when authority is present? We don't want to disagree with the authority. When it might alienate you from your friends? When you might be excluded or left out? When it might cause subordinates to think less of you? When you might need, lose some status? So here it's looking at, do you do it in relationship to people who you see as more powerful than you? People who are, those are the authorities, people who are equal, your friends and colleagues, and people who you seem to be higher than, so your subordinates. and how we're always classifying ourselves in relationship to these, and how it influences us. We all have automatic thoughts when we feel anxious. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to look like an idiot. Right? So, do what the crowd does. The point is not to listen to those thoughts, but to be aware of them and override them. And to do that, we need to practice. Hey, this sounds familiar. Like pilots who use flight simulators, people need to work on situations that cause them anxiety before they occur. Okay, and so sometimes they use role-playing, have people role-play employees initiating potentially challenging conversations. So you do role plays where you imagine, speaking up in these kinds of situations. When most of us feel uncomfortable, we shut up. But we need to use discomfort to know that that is my signal to be courageous and a cue for action rather than inaction. Okay, so that's interesting because usually it's true. When we're in a group and we feel uncomfortable, okay, downplay the differences, don't cause waves, do what everybody else is doing, and you'll be accepted and no problem. But she's saying that's the time when we should perk up and really look inside and say what's going on, and to be courageous in, first of all, figuring out what's going on inside of ourselves, and then vocalizing it if it's something that ethically needs to be said for the benefit of self and others. The focus on why people do and don't act ethically is not, of course, limited to the business world. After all, it takes good citizens to make good employees. Okay. So this one person started a program called Heroic Imagination Project. His name is Philip Zimbardo, and his interest in ethics dates far back. He was the one that created the notorious Stanford prison experiment, where college students pretended to be guards and demean and humiliated student prisoners. The experiment had to be stopped early because it became so abusive. Are you familiar with that one? When the people began to be able to initiate shocks, for people who did something wrong, they really started doing it and took advantage. After studying moral degradation for decades, Professor Zimbardo started wondering about the 10 to 20% of people in every situation who resisted going along with this. Who were these people who he called heroes, and could anyone be taught to be one? Through the Heroic Imagination Project, middle and high school and community college students learned about group dynamics, like the bystander effect, in which the more people who are at a scene, the less likely it is for anybody to help. Have you seen videos of those experiments? If somebody's like lying on the entrance to a subway station and there's lots of people there, everybody just looks and keeps walking. If there's nobody around, more people go and kind of tap the person and are you okay, and see what's going on. Quite interesting, isn't it? Because we kind of walk by and, well, nobody else is doing anything, so the situation must be okay. So I'll just do what everybody else is doing, because if I go over, people will wonder why I'm doing that and not what everybody else is doing. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah. Using video clips and real-life situations, teachers explain how students can resist such behavior and help them explore why they have acted or failed to act in specific situations. While students are taught not to be dumb heroes and rush into danger, we teach them that knowledge obligates you to do something, to act heroically. Yeah, so not just, oh, there's somebody who needs help, I'm going to save the world, without checking out what's going on in the situation. Not do that. But on the other hand, if you know something, like he said, you have an obligation to act heroically, to do something to benefit. Okay. His nonprofit program has made many of its resources available free. Okay, so another researcher has found that the rescuers say, what else could I do? So the people who step in these situations say, what else could I do? In other words, here's the situation. Somebody's lying on the subway steps, whatever happened, there's a car crash. What else could I do? I've got to stop. Somebody needs it. The bystanders say, I was just one person. What could I do? Interesting, isn't it? How we explain things to ourselves. Now, I'm just one person. What could I do in this situation? Versus, I'm there. Somebody needs to do something. Yeah, might as well be me. We have to think, who am I and how do my actions create who I am? Okay, and this professor recalled interviewing a Dutch woman who stood by and watched while Jews were thrown into a truck and taken away during World War II. But the woman later saved more than a dozen others. So somehow she had stood by at one point and not done anything, yeah, and probably realized what was going on and then saved the lives of others afterwards. Or it could have been that, when the Nazis were already there hauling people off, she couldn't do much unless she did something afterwards, either to save people or to make it known to others what was going on. So it's hard to say what exactly her mental processes were. Oh, here it says, next paragraph. Professor Monroe remembers what the woman told her. We all have memories when we should have done something and it gets in the way for the rest of your life. So that's the answer. She felt bad about not stepping in and doing something. And so then she saved others later. So the thing is, if we know that we fail to do what is morally correct, according to our own values and precepts, that the pain of not doing that is going to be floating around and obscuring our mind for a long, long time. And so, as Buddhists, I think, first of all, we have a lot of encouragement beforehand that when there's a situation when we can help, to step up and help. Of course, we all often have to assess whether we're the right person to help or not. Okay? Sometimes we are not the right person. If you're very close to somebody, a close relative, or you're very close emotionally, and that person is going through some emotional disturbances, sometimes you may not be the right person that they need to talk to. Yeah, when a teenager is having problems with their parents, they don't need their parents to come to them and do, kind of counsel them. They need to be able to connect with another wise adult who they can listen to, because at that moment they can't listen to their parents. Or like I said, if you're very close to somebody, your coming to them may elicit a lot of attachment or a lot of anger. And so you may not be the best person to help somebody solve a certain problem. Okay? So we have to assess when we should step in and when not. But to know that if we're just hanging back out of fear or self-concern or what are other people going to think of me, that the pain of having lost that situation, who wants to carry that around with us? But to also know that, because we've all missed situations in the past and not stepped in when we could have, or not been completely honest when we could have, to know that then we should do purification practice. So as Buddhists, we have that opportunity. We have the 4 opponent powers. We know how to use them. So instead of having to carry around regrets for the rest of our life, we purify and we develop, we train our mind and practice in our meditation, imagining, thinking, and acting differently in future situations. So that we come out of the purification practice with a stronger determination to act the way we want to be able to act when those situations happen. Okay, instead of having it hanging over ourselves for a long time. Anybody have anything? Mm-hmm.
An experience many years ago. I was on jury duty, and it was a suit against a policeman for being too rough. I forget what they call that, but police brutality.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the people were saying things like, "Let's get this taken care of really quick, and let's get out of here."
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole deal, instead of doing it properly.
Yeah.
It was so hard to say what you felt, because then you got all this backlash.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, but then people turned, and it.
Yeah. Yeah, so jury duty's a good example. If most of the people feel one way, but you don't feel that way, to be able to express yourself in that situation and have a dialogue with the other people. And you're saying their minds were able to change. Yeah. Okay. Yeah?
I think it's kind of complicated, because I remember one time I was exactly in that situation where somebody was lying there and two people had clashed on bikes. There were a group of people around them, but nobody was doing anything. And I knew what to do, so I did. But in another situation that I've been thinking about, where I could have said something where people were being, I don't know, I didn't say something then. I didn't know how to really broach the subject, you know what I mean? So it seems like situational based on what you have some skills for.
That's true. Yeah, that certain situations you have skills you know how to handle, so it's easy to step in. Other situations, you don't really know what to do and what is skillful action. Yeah, that's true. So you hang back.